Professional teacher status, for those of you that don't know exactly what it is what used to be called tenure. And what it means is that unlike in the old days when teachers were considered political appointees by the school committee, by the mayor, by the superintendent, and could be dismissed at any time, a law was written and passed in Massachusetts before any other state that said that once you worked for 3 years, you could not be fired unless, I think the technical language was, unless you screwed up big time. Yes, that's the technical language in Chapter 71. Actually, it's much more formal than that. They have a procedure, but basically, the employer has the burden of proving that you have done seriously wrong, something seriously wrong, and you have the right to challenge it in arbitration, which is a neutral person. So you have the right to your job as a presumption, unless you run afoul of a number of itemized things, insubordination, incompetence, etc., and you have the right to challenge a discharge. So professional teacher status, formerly called tenure, is a very, very good thing to have. It means job security. So the question is, how do you earn professional teacher status? It's a very good law, but there is a serious flaw. And the flaw is that it takes a long time before you earn it, 3 years typically. But the question arises, what does it mean to say 3 years? What does it take for a year to qualify? What about if you start late? What about if you have a sick day? What about if you have a break in service? What about if you leave early? When does the year start? When does it end? All of those questions. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who think they are experts who have told lots of people what it means, and many of them are wrong. So I want to give you the specifics. These, if you've heard something else, it's wrong. This is correct, okay? To meet the standard of the 3 years, I tell people to remember the 3 C's, the 3 C's of professional teacher status. What are they? The first C is for a year to count, it must be a complete year. C for complete. That means the whole year. 2, for a year to count, it must be worked under a proper C for certification. Now, actually, it's a license in Massachusetts. It used to be called a certification, so it really should be L, but it's much cooler to say 3 C's. So C for complete, C for certification, and third, for the year to count, the third C is it must be consecutive years. Complete, certified, and consecutive. And I know many of you are wondering, well, what about this year when you're home? Well, we'll make sure to address that. So complete, properly certified, and consecutive. You all got it? All right, we're going to test you. And unfortunately, I can't see you, so I'm just going to ask you to answer this question in your chat box. We're going to play a game. And the game is PTS or no PTS. That's right, PTS or no PTS. I'll describe the practice of a teacher, and you will put in your chat box either PTS or no PTS if you don't think they've earned PTS, all right? Teacher number one. Teacher number one is a high school math teacher. He applied for his job and was hired in July and started work as a math teacher at the high school on the very first day of school. He has a 9 through 12 math license, math certification. He worked the entire first year without taking a day off. He worked the entire second year without taking a day off, also as a high school teacher, teaching different subjects of high school math. And he did the same thing in his third year. Started on the first day, worked through to the last day of school, all at the high school, all teaching math. On the last day of school, the students left the building at the end of the day, and he left the building at the appropriate time, finishing his third year. The question for you is, at that moment, PTS or no PTS? Think for a second, put in that box, PTS or PTS. For those of you who said no PTS, I'd like somebody to volunteer to say why no PTS. Does he have PTS on that last day of school at the end of the day?
All right, I'll say yes.
No.
Who says no?
Janice.
Well, okay, why not? Why doesn't he have it?
Because he has to work the first day of the following year.
That's
in
correct.
September.
All right. Who's heard that? Raise your hand if you think that's correct. Because he had to work on the next year one day. Who has heard you have to work 3 years and then come back and work the first day of the fourth year? All right, Andrea Lombardi, and there are at least a few other people because other people said no PTS. Okay. The answer is this teacher has PTS. Having finished his third year, the law is very clear. It says upon completion of 3 years, you do not have to come back on the first day of your fourth year. Where people get hung up is that they think they have to be renewed and they have to come back and start in their fourth year. They do not, because if the employer has not notified you by June 15th that you are non-renewed, you are presumed to be renewed and you are considered PTS that summer and that following year. You do not have to come back, okay? By the way, for those of you that want to be persnickety and check it out, it's chapter 71, section 41 of Mass General Law. All right? Okay. Second case of PTS or no PTS, we have a middle school art teacher, and she has a pre-K through 12 art certification. She is hired in July, but she doesn't start on the very first day of school because she's replacing a teacher who's retiring on October 1st. So she starts her first year on October 3rd. She works the remainder of the year every single day, does not take a sick day, comes back her second year, works the entire year, her second year teaching middle school art. She comes back her third year, works a complete, uninterrupted third year under her license. By the way, she's a very good art teacher. She comes back for her fourth year. She is in her fourth year. She teaches through October 3rd, her anniversary date. For those of you that remember, she was hired October 3rd of her first year. Now it's past October. It's now April of her fourth year. PTS or no PTS? Fill in your forms. Oh, this is great. I see the different charts, the different graphs. Excellent work. All right. Pencils down, fingers down, however you voted. I see 39, 40% said PTS and 61% said no PTS. Will somebody volunteer who said no PTS to tell us why no PTS?
It has to be a complete year?
Brendan O'Malley said it has to be a complete year. But wait a second. She worked past her anniversary date, so doesn't that count?
No,
No,
because
because it has to be.
You have to start on the first day.
The first
You
year
have to start on the
does
first
not,
day of school.
well, we're going to get to how do you know if the first year counts. There are some exceptions, but you cannot carry over the days from an incomplete first year and work into an incomplete fourth year. You have to have 3 complete years from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So for extra credit, when would this teacher, assuming that she was not non-renewed, when would she earn her PTS? All right, I'll ask you to think about that. Who said it was at the end of her 4th year? Just raise your hands if you think, yes. End of her 4th year, not the first day of her 5th year. Now, there are some exceptions. Typically, if I were doing this in your school, we'd have some interaction about the exceptions, but I'm just going to do it with direct instruction because there are now, I don't have the full count, but I think it's over 400. All right. First of all, the courts, the Supreme Judicial Court has said if you miss the first 3 days or the first 2 days or the first day, that's close enough. It counts as a complete year. So 1, 2, or 3 days does not disqualify the year. The courts have also ruled that more than 28 days, if you start after 28 days from the first of the year does not count at all, ever. It's a null set, does not count. So the question arises, and it's an important question, what about absences? If I call out sick 5 times during the year, do those days count? I'm sent home from school because of the coronavirus, and I don't teach in school for the last 3 effing months of the year, and I'm on Zoom till my eyes are popping out of my head. Does the year not count? Wouldn't that be horrible? What about if I'm on a leave of absence? What about if I have maternity leave? What about if I'm in a car accident? So what counts and what doesn't count? I'm going to tell you, you can put it in the book and rely on it. First thing, and this should relieve a lot of your anxiety. The Supreme Judicial Court has ruled that if you are paid for the day, it counts if you worked. So, what about this year? Are you being paid? Nod your head if you're being paid. You better damn well be being paid, so it counts. If you're out sick, it counts if you're paid. If you've exceeded your paid sick leave, it may not count. What about maternity leave? Now, maternity leave is a special case because under the law, you're allowed, and this is not just for maternity, this is for disability, this is for long-term illness, this is for taking care of a sick relative. There's a law called the Family and Medical Leave Act. Raise your hands if you've heard of the Family and Medical Leave Act. Okay. There's also a state equivalent. Under the Family and Medical Leave Act, it says that you may miss up to 12 weeks, that's 60 days of time because of your own personal illness, because you are taking care of a sick immediate relative, because of maternity. You can miss up to 12 weeks, 60 days, and you do not suffer a diminishment of your rights or status. And though even if you're a third-year teacher, let's say, and you've saved all your sick days, that would only be typically around 45 sick days. If you took your full 60 days, well, that would leave at least 15 unpaid days. Even so, if you are under the auspices of the Family and Medical Leave Act and have limited your leave to 12 weeks or fewer, 60 or fewer days, the employer cannot deny you professional teacher status for that time. However, there are some contracts, most contracts, that allow teachers to extend that leave, in some cases for up to 2 years. So let's say you deliver a baby and you start your leave in January, and 12 weeks later, at the end of March, you say, you know what? I love little Johnny. I can't be away from him anymore this year. I'm going to stay home till the end of the year. And you stay off for more than 12 weeks, then the year does not count, because you're no longer off on Family and Medical Leave Act. You've exceeded the time. The same is true if you're in a car accident and you're out for 12 weeks and then you can't come back and it's longer than 12 weeks. The protections of the Family and Medical Leave Act no longer apply. It doesn't mean it's fair. It doesn't mean it's right. That's just what the law says. Clear on that? Okay. There are some other exceptional cases, but rather than play the game PTS or no PTS, I'm just going to tell you some of the other exceptions. So the case sometimes comes up during the year. A teacher, this is often at the elementary school level. I've come across a number of cases of this. I've been a union rep for 37 years of one form or another. So I've seen a lot of things. A teacher at the elementary level, let's say a second grade teacher, excellent teacher, in her third year, is asked to take over a substantially separate special ed class. The teacher left for some reason. The elementary school teacher knows those kids very well because they come in and out of her class. And so the principal asks her to take over this class, leave her class. They have a sub for her class, and she teaches the substantially separate class, special ed class. But there's a problem. The problem is her license is elementary, not special ed. And so she's working out of her license. The employer says, don't worry about it. We have a waiver from DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have a waiver. You're fine. And she agrees, and she teaches the class at the end of the year. And she comes back for her fourth year. And her fifth year, he puts her back to her elementary school class. She's a great teacher. Unfortunately, the principal, at the end of her fifth year, I hope you're all following me. I hope this isn't too confusing. At the end of her fifth year, he leaves and a new principal comes in. She comes back with the new principal in her sixth year. She's teaching, and on May 1st, the new principal sends her a notice of non-renewal. Does she have PTS? The answer is no. She does not have PTS because she had that interruption of her licensed position. When you're working under a waiver, it does not count. So her third year did not count at all because it was not complete. I wish there were a way that I could hear. If you have any thoughts about that, you should put them in the chat box. I'm happy to answer them, but I want to make sure you understand the third year was not complete. So when she came back for her fourth year, it was her first, because you need 3 consecutive years, right? Her first year was fine. Her second year was fine. Her third year did not count. And so when she started back on her fourth year, it was like her first year. And she did not have PTS after her first, after her second. And so her sixth year, which was really like her third year, they could non-renew her. And they did. And so the question arises, is there anything this poor teacher could have done in her third year when she was asked to take over this class, this special ed class, and she was doing this big favor for her boss, the principal, is there anything she could have done to protect her job? And I want you to know about it, because what she could have done, you can do. What she could have done is she could have gone to her principal and said, Mr. Principal, you want me to take over this class? If I do that, I don't get PTS this year and I have to work another 3 years to get it. So I will take over that class, but I want you to give me PTS right now before I take over this class. Now, if her principal was like most principals that you deal with, he would have said, oh, look, I think you're a great teacher and I wish I could give it to you. But didn't you go to that training by that loud, over-animated guy from the MTA who said you need the 3 C's? It needs to be complete, it needs to be certified, and they need to be consecutive. Well, you haven't finished your 3rd year, so I can't give you PTS. That's what he would say. And that might be what you think. But the truth is, and I'm holding up a copy of the law. If you were doing this training in person, I'd hand it out to all of you. But I'm going to read you what the law says. And I think at least many of you will be very surprised and will learn something that you did not know about professional teacher status. This is Chapter 71. You can look this up online. Chapter 71, Section 41. It is the 2nd sentence. It is line 5. I am reading it verbatim. And here's what it says. The superintendent of said district, upon the recommendation of the principal, may award such status, that's professional teacher status, to any teacher who has served in the principal's school for not less than 1 year. Or, and this is the other part that blew my mind when I first read the law, or to a teacher who has obtained such status, PTS, in any other public school district in the Commonwealth. What does that mean? I'll break it down for you really simply. It means that if your principal and the superintendent want to, they can give you PTS at the end of 1 year or later. They don't have to wait. Now, they may want to wait. They may not want to give it to you after only 1 year, but they can. And for any of you that have earned professional teacher status in another district, or when you earn it in your district, if you go to another district, they can voluntarily give you PTS upon hire. Hardly any teachers know this. So when they go from Agawam and they decide they don't like Agawam and they go to Chicopee, or they go to Long Meadow or East Long Meadow, or they're in Chelsea and they get a job offer in Weston and they think they've gone to heaven, they don't ask for PTS. But many principals, many superintendents privately, quietly grant PTS to attract a teacher to a job, or to keep a really hot, good 1st or 2nd year teacher from leaving the district and going someplace else for better pay. So you need to know that. All right, I'm going to pause now. And if any of you have questions about what I've presented so far, I want you to, I think what we're going to do is have you put them in the chat box, and I will then have them read by either Courtney or Sarah, and I will answer them for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then I'm going to move on to your rights before you have PTS, which are numerous. A lot of teachers think until they get their professional teacher status, they have no rights. You have a lot of rights. I'm going to enumerate them in about 10 minutes. But Courtney or Sarah, is anybody asking any questions?
Ashley, we actually have quite a few questions.
All right.
So,
Field a few of them, and then I'll do my best to answer them, and then I'll stick around and make sure everybody's questions are answered.
yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, so we may have to figure out an additional way to follow up with some folks as well. So there have been several questions about whether or not if they move from one district to another, if they get PTS in one district and then they move to another. Or
All right, good. Let's stop right there.
Okay.
The answer is your PTS is district by district. If you are in PTS in Springfield and you leave Springfield, you leave your PTS behind. The only way you acquire PTS in another district is either you earn it after 3 complete consecutive properly certified years, or, as I just covered, they give it to you voluntarily sooner. All right, everybody get that? Next question.
What if I started as part-time and then I went to full-time? How does that
Excellent.
work?
Excellent question. The question is, when you are working part-time, are you earning your PTS credit at the same rate or a different rate than if you were working full-time? And the answer is, it does not matter. If you are a 0.2, you are earning it the same as if you are a 1.0 or a 0.5. You work 3 years part-time, it's the same as 3 years full-time. 2 more questions, and then I'm going to move on.
What if I started a few weeks after the start date, or I started
Right.
the school
The
year?
answer is 3 days or fewer, the year definitely counts. Fewer than 28, but not as few as 3. It's a gray area. We don't know. More than 28 days, the year does not count. So what do I recommend? This is something that applies to everybody in many situations. So this is key. If you are thinking the employer may not be recognizing your PTS, but you think you have earned it. So let's say you started on the 15th day, and now it's the end of the 3rd year. And you want to know if the employer considers you professional teacher status or not. Do not ask that question. Why? Because as long as you are renewed, because you haven't gotten a non-renewal notice, you have no reason to be engaged in a discussion about whether you have PTS. You don't want to alert your employer to the fact that you may not have it, because most principals are not paying attention to the date you were hired. If they don't think you have PTS and they renew you anyway, just continue to work and do your job and hope that they don't non-renew you. If they non-renew you and you think you have PTS, but the employer does not, then we have a fight. Then you go to your union and we argue you have your PTS.
Good job, buddy.
So that's key. So if the employer thinks, let's say it's the end of your 3rd year and the employer comes to you and they say, well, normally you think you'd have PTS, but because of that maternity leave, you don't. Don't dispute it, because as long as they're renewing you, who cares what they think? Sooner or later, you'll work 8 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you'll get your PTS no matter how they define it. On the other hand, if they are putting your job on the line and they're saying we're non-renewing you and you think you have PTS, then we have a problem. Then you contact the union. Then we go to war. All right? One more question and then we're going to move on.
There's a question about how PTS is actually conferred. What is it?
These are all great questions. How is PTS actually conferred? In some school districts, they may do a letter to you. Maybe they have a breakfast or a dinner or something they give you. It's a matter of law. Whether they acknowledge it or don't, there is no certificate you get from the state. Think of PTS kind of like your right to drink legally in Massachusetts. When you turn 21, you don't get a letter from the governor saying, congratulations, you now have earned the right to drink. You have it as a matter of law. And if somebody denies you the right to drink, or they pull you over and they say you're not 21 and you can prove you are 21, that's all that matters. So under the law, you have your PTS if you meet the criteria that I described. Whether your superintendent says they don't think you have it, or your evaluations were poor, or you missed too many days of sick leave, once you have 3 complete, properly certified consecutive years, you have your PTS. All right? Again, I'll stick around for more questions, but I want to get to your rights under the law because they are substantial. 4 categories of rights. That's right, count them, 4. First, your union contract is a legally enforceable document whether or not you have PTS, schedule of work, breaks, prep time, teaching load, all of that, salary scale, advancement on the salary scale, all of those things apply to you with equal power under the law, whether you have your PTS or not, which is a sideways of saying, get to know your contract, because that can protect you in ways that principals don't always do. I mean, they may try to squeeze you thinking you don't know about your rights into doing extra stuff or giving up a prep or doing whatever. You should know your rights. They're legally enforceable, and your union is there to assist you in making sure that you get what's coming to you. Not more than what's coming to you, but what's coming to you. Okay. Second, under the law, under Chapter 71, after 90 calendar days of your first year, so once you've been employed for 90 calendar days, not 90 school days, but 3 months into the year, essentially, you have certain job security rights, not as good as PTS, which is the gold standard, but some rights that actually work in your favor if you know about them. First of all, if the employer wants to fire you or suspend you, first 90 days, they can just do it and say you're done, goodbye. But after 90 days on the calendar, they first must, by law, notify you of their intent to suspend or fire you. They must give you a meeting within 10 days, if you want one, where you get to present and have an advocate, union rep, or an attorney assigned for free by the union, your side of the story. And that representative, attorney, or union rep has full subpoena power to get any documents, witnesses on your behalf. So that's the law. That's the second category of rights you have. It's after 90 days on the calendar. Third set of rights. These are what are generally known as the anti-discrimination or retaliation laws. And they're very good, even though you may think you know them, and yeah, but you're not going to claim discrimination. There are a number of categories you might not think about that do apply, whether you have PTS or not. There are 9 categories. I'll see if I can remember them. Some of them are obvious. Some of them you know because you've heard about them all your life. It's illegal to discriminate against somebody because of their race, because of their sex, because of their national origin, because of their sexual orientation, because of their age, if they are 40 or over, because of their disability. And the employer has an affirmative obligation to make reasonable accommodations for that disability. So if they're saying, well, we don't do that here because we don't, blah, 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 blah. No, that's illegal. If somebody has a legitimate disability, the employer has to make a reasonable accommodation. So if you have diabetes and you need a couple of 5-minute breaks to inject insulin, it would be unreasonable to deny you those extra 5-minute breaks. If you have MS and you can't climb stairs and your doctor says, please assign this person a classroom on the first floor, and the employer says, screw them, we don't make special cases for anybody, that's illegal. It's also illegal to retaliate against somebody for being a whistleblower. Now, teachers don't often think of themselves as whistleblowers, but more often than you might think, whistleblower protection comes up for teachers in the following way. Do any of you have any students with an ed plan? Nod your head if you have everybody's nodding their head. Okay. You often have parents who are very demanding when it comes to following the ed plan, or when it can't be followed, having an outplacement for their child. Sometimes they come to a teacher, you, and they ask you to testify on their behalf at a hearing or to sign an affidavit claiming that you have witnessed violations of their ed plan. If you are involved and you are then dismissed or suspended, and you believe that the reason is because it's retaliation for you siding with a parent over the school district, that's illegal. And if it can be proven, you're not just entitled to your back pay and your job back, you're entitled to triple damages. So 3 times your pay or lost wages. So that's an important right that applies whether you're PTS or non-PTS. And finally, this is the final anti-discrimination right that you have, is it is illegal to retaliate against you for union activity, concerted activity. The last of the 4 categories. The last of the 4 categories of your rights. And if you remember nothing else from this training, I want you to remember this. All right? You remember nothing else. It is the job protection power of your evaluation procedure. Now, it's not what you think. Many people think erroneously that if they get really good evaluations and they're non-renewed, they can point to those good evaluations to get their job back. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. They have the right to non-renew you if you are exemplary in every category all 3 years. It does not trump their ability to non-renew you. But here's what does matter. And it's one thing. And you should know it and carry it in your brain until you get your PTS. The employer is legally and contractually obliged to follow the evaluation procedure laid out in your contract or in a document called the evaluation procedure that is adopted by reference in your contract. If they don't, in a substantial way, if they fail to do your formative assessment in your second year, your summative in your first, they skip the first 3 evaluations of your 3rd year, they, in some significant way, they did not follow that procedure and you are non-renewed, what is the only remedy to their failure to comply with the contractual and legal evaluation procedure? If they non-renew you and you're out the door, what is the only way that they can properly remedy their failure to evaluate you? There's only one way. They have to put you back to work for another year. This is known as the Hull, H-U-L-L again, I was the rep that promulgated this, the Hull decision. Okay, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to take questions, but before I do, you are going to have the shortest evaluation survey ever. So take 30 seconds to fill it out. I think we're going to do that right now and then take questions. Courtney?
So there are a couple pressing questions that have repeatedly come up in the chat that I think you need to address.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and they're people, there seems to be some confusion about PTS versus professional licensure.
Okay.
And then that's come up quite a bit. And then people are also wondering about the role of mentoring in PTS.
Okay, let me cover the first one first and the second one second. Professional teacher status is entirely separate from licensure. Your professional license is a function of your experience, your education, MTELs, mentoring, all those things. And in fact, we have experts in that if you sent me an email and asked about how you can get your professional license in science, you've been elementary and you want to switch and you've taken these courses and you've done, we will answer all those questions, but we will need you to fill out a log sheet, and I can take care of that if you email me. The question of mentoring, what is the question?
There's been a discussion about whether or not mentoring is required for PTS, and I believe
It is
relates
not.
to professional
It
license.
is not required for PTS. The only things that are required for PTS are the 3 C's: a complete year, a properly certified year, and the years must be consecutive. If your school system, for whatever reason, totally screws up on your mentoring, that does not affect your PTS at all.